You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Thank you so much for joining me today on this Total Wellness Tuesday, where last week I explained, last Tuesday, that was episode 767, what to ask for and why when running your annual blood work. And I said that it's not like a nice thing to do or you should do. You really have to run your blood work on an annual basis. So for anyone in their 20s, 30s, if you have nothing wrong, great. Just run it once a year. For those people who have a marker or two off, well, then of course you're going to want to run that every 6 months just to make sure that you get it back to homeostasis or equilibrium. Really, really important. But today, so that's a given, okay? I'm not discounting the importance of running your blood work. You absolutely do need to do it. And I look at it all the time in my practice, and I consider it part of the foundation of a good overall functional medicine an integrative wellness practice, as well as anti-aging based plan. One of the reasons is I want to see how you're aging, meaning that I'd love to know the markers in your 20s versus your 30s versus your 40s and 50s. So I can say, hey, this is this person at their best, maybe in their mid 20s or so. And this is what it looks like at 50. So for you, you might not need to be at the top of the range to feel great. We might need to just bring you to mid-range in order for you to feel like you were back in your 20s. So that's why bioindividuality is this really important thing. I work with a lot of guys and they say, I want to boost my testosterone. But the truth is that their testosterone was never at the high end, even at, let's say, 18 to 20 years old. It was more like mid-range to just above the mid-range, not the high. So all I have to do for them is get that back to that mid-range or just a little bit above that. That's just one example. And they feel great again, right? Naturally, we can do that without having to supplement testosterone. Same for a lot of women. You know, there's a lot of women out there and more of the endomorphic body type or kapha body type. They are naturally more prone to higher levels of estrogen. Well, that's totally different than an ectomorphic woman or a vata-based woman who might have lower levels of hormones, lower levels of testosterone versus like the pitta body type, lower levels of estrogen and progesterone. So again, for them, I'm just looking to make sure that they feel optimal, that they feel healthy. But of course, everyone should fall within the normal parameters. And last week, just keep in mind, check out that episode 767 because I gave you where those healthy ranges should be. Now today though, I need to explain this because this is very important. Running your blood work, running your annual blood work, although very important, it's not enough. It's just a starting point. And to be honest, if you have something wrong with you, very, very unlikely, unless you have a disease-based state, that your blood work's going to show up with anything. So here's the issue. 17 years old, go into my doctor's office, my PCP. Couldn't find anything wrong with me because my blood work looked pretty good except for some issues with my white blood cells. And like, oh, you have mono. Okay, so that was it. They couldn't find anything else. Go to the next specialist. The specialist runs additional blood work. Didn't run blood work that showed anything wrong with me. So technically, there was nothing wrong with me. And that's the problem, right? So I felt terrible. Couldn't walk up a flight of stairs without my heart rate skyrocketing to like 150, 160 beats per minute, getting lightheaded, heart rate's racing, started to sweat, need to lie down on the stairs, like legitimately that bad. Sinus infections all the time, stomach pains, intestinal pain. I mean, all these different things, but yet the blood work looked okay. So that's why I'm telling you right now, your blood work a lot of times can look fine. That doesn't mean you're fine. Blood is what we call a homeostatic fluid. This is very important, especially it's important for you so that you know how to take back control of your health. But it's also important if you're a health practitioner right now and you don't need to know all of this. Like I truly believe, I don't want this to get twisted in any way. I'm a huge believer in like conventional medicine as an allopathic form, looking at disease-based state. I'm not against that. But what I am against is the conventional medicine not being open to natural medicine or really integrative medicine because it's just a state of the art where other lab tests should be looked at. So I think it's great. I mean, everyone should have an MD and everybody should have an ND or a health practitioner that they work with. That could be a registered dietitian that's really integrative because most RDs are just following the food pyramid. It could be a really brilliant personal trainer. It could be a health coach. Could be a naturopathic doctor, could be a really great integrative chiropractor, acupuncturist, again, so many great practitioners. But have both. Why not? I mean, you can totally have both. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's why I said, even if you just go to your PCP to have them run your annual blood work, then fantastic. Just make sure you request what I gave you for the list and the downloadable list at 767. Okay. Just go to steamcabral.com/767 and you'll be able to see that there. But now let's keep in mind though, let's get back to topic. Blood is a homeostatic fluid. What does that mean? It means that it will rob every part of your body necessary in order to keep it looking good, in order to keep your levels at, again, equilibrium or homeostasis. So what does that mean? Well, if your body doesn't have enough calcium, it's just going to pull it from your bones. It will literally start to pull from the bones to make sure that it's level. Let's say that it doesn't have enough fatty acids or so. It will pull from organs. It will pull from even your eyes. I mean, all of those things. It will draw what it needs to from your body. Now, at some point, though, it can get imbalanced. It can get imbalanced in terms of what? Your red blood cells, meaning like there could be a lack of oxygen, right? Oxygen in the red blood cells, that lack of iron. It could be inflammation in the arteries that will show up if you know what to run on the blood test. And I gave you that on the last show. You could have thyroid issues. You could have cholesterol issues. So you can have many issues. But remember, all of those things only go wrong once you've been in it for too long. Meaning that blood is not really good at looking at acute-based issues. You can run some very specific markers like C-reactive protein, right? CRP. That's acute-based inflammation of the body. Totally understood. Most things, though, you're looking at markers. You're looking at markers that develop over a period of time. Really, really important to look at that. Now, here's an example of that. Not too long ago, it's been probably about a year now, but this particular case really sticks out of my mind, and I'm sure it always will. Because I had someone come to me for a second opinion. They were in really bad shape. All of a sudden, they weren't able to walk anymore. They lost all the color in their face. They lost a lot of the oxygen in their body. And they were really going downhill very, very quickly, meaning like really quickly. The prognosis was not good. And since this person was a direct referral, we got them in. I reviewed their blood work. And I said, they were given the diagnosis of cancer. Okay. Well, they hadn't done any biopsies. They haven't done anything like that yet. But they were about to see specialists. They'd run blood work multiple times. And they said, would you mind reviewing all of this blood work? And it's quite a bit when it's cancer-based, meaning like it's very, very extensive. And I had to look at multiple blood work. I had to sit down with it for an hour, not on the phone with them, but really dissecting it myself. And so at first, I thought it was cancer as well. And I looked at it because of D-dimer and other markers that you might not typically see run on blood work, and they were off. But after I started to look at it more, I said, there is too much wrong, and the white blood cells aren't off enough for this to be most likely cancer. I said, it's still possible. I keep my mind open to all the possibilities. I said, but this looks actually much deeper than cancer. This looks like an actual degenerative catabolic issue with the body, not necessarily a tumor-based cancer, or again, it could be a blood-based cancer as well. And so what I did was I said, okay, these are potential issues that are going on right now. I need you to run a few more markers. They went back to their specialists. Specialists, of course, gave them a hard time, which is completely insane. Like, this is the story every day of my life that I hear. Like, specialists at PCP, they don't want to run things. They're like, oh, no, we don't really need to run that. No, you should run it. Run the test. It doesn't hurt you. The data is only helpful. It never hurts. Just run the test. That's it. So we ran the test, and lo and behold, when I had this data, I was able to piece it together. Now, again, I'm not the only person that can do this, but what I was able to do was just see things from an integrative naturopathic or functional medicine perspective that allowed me to see. And again, this was postdoctoral work, so I don't really teach this in school. But for me, I love this. I mean, I really do. Like, this is what I'm passionate about. It's not work for me. I mean, I study this. I look into it. I find it very, very fascinating. To me, it's like forensics. It's like a puzzle, and I need to figure out what's going on with this person. Why is this person healthy 3, 4, 6 weeks ago and just massively degenerating to the point where they can no longer walk? So what I found was this, okay? They had lead poisoning. So I was able to discern that based on multiple base lab tests. And then I also found out that it wasn't just lead poisoning. What was also a big underlying cause for this, not only did they have lead poisoning, but they also had internal microscopic bleeding. And I could tell that was one of those things that wasn't because of just iron deficiency or anemia, because this was an adult male. That would be very, very rare. But what happened was the internal microscopic bleeding was actually then leading to a certain form of anemia as well. So what we did was luckily, before they were going to do invasive surgeries, biopsy, all the things for cancer, is we found out that it wasn't cancer. It was tissue destruction, but it was tissue destruction because of this massive stress oxidation from having that much lead in their body. And then which they got, by the way, from work, which is why you always have to do a full intake on a wellness client to really figure out what's going on. I realized after a longer intake, I said, what's going on? How did this happen? And I found out that they were working actually in like, they're a city worker, and they worked and they were exposed to water, groundwater, and they had a cut on their leg and they got massive lead exposure. So again, these are just questions that you have to ask. And so what we did was do a very rapid heavy metal detox protocol, as well as some red blood cell building, so some blood building right away. And then some mucosal based work, so some healthy gut support and some DGL and some different things to basically coat aloe vera, to coat the lining of the intestines to decrease this inflammation, to help with the microscopic bleeding. Now, this was in the short term, but within 3 to 4 weeks, back on their feet, feeling much better. And then it was probably like 8 to 10 weeks completely better. So that was an amazing turnaround, something to this day that I'm super happy about. I'm proud of it. I really am. Like, this is why I do this work. And it's not to say that it's just about me or no, this is the type of medicine that you have access to. You honestly do. And you just have to keep pushing, and you have to keep asking for your numbers, and you have to keep pushing forward. That's it. I mean, that's the honest truth. That's how I got better. And I have to thank my mom and my father as well, who kept saying, like, you have to get my son better. It's like, there has to be another test. And when conventional medicine wasn't able to, my mother found this random place, 20 years ago, that all of a sudden they were doing functional medicine essentially in its infancy. And I was able to see a functional medicine doctor who ran some of the tests that I'm about to share with you now. So here's the thing. This person that I just talked about that they thought had cancer, had they run some of these other tests, had they looked at those things previously, or even months ago, if this patient had done that themselves, they would have found out this much, much earlier. And so this is how I got better. It's what I want to do. I want to share it with the world. You can see a local practitioner in your area. If you're overseas, you can see a practitioner. You can work over Skype with myself or one of my health coaches in my practice. You can order a lab, which is much less expensive than even working in our practice. You can do whatever you need to do, but the truth is the answers are out there for you. I mean, I can't say that enough. The answers are out there for you. And then once you get those answers, and then it's just time to put it into practice. Just move forward, one foot in front of the other. You're probably not going to get it right the first day, the first week, the first month, but you keep tweaking it. You will get it right. You will get better. You'll have your life back. And then you have options. You have options to do anything you want in your life once you have that energy. And that's really what the Cabral concept's all about. It's about change your body first, right? Change your body, change your life. It's so hard to change everything in your life, the perfect relationship, feeling great, being happy. It's so hard to do that if you're not well, or if you're carrying an extra 30, 40, 50 pounds. It just weighs on you. The illness weighs on you. The stress weighs on you. The weight weighs on you until you fix it. So what we have to do is we have to look at our blood work. If the blood work is okay, well, and you still don't feel well, it's not enough. My mentor, taught me many, many years ago that truly the Ayurveda, yes, that is the answer. But in Ayurvedic medicine, she believes that had they had access to these functional medicine lab tests, of course, they would have been using them to this day, without a doubt. So here's what annual blood work misses. I mean, this is the truth, meaning that it got me well, it gets people well in my practice, even when their blood work looks great, and it helped this person that I just gave the case study. It's just one person, but it's just one that sticks out to me, who thought they had cancer, but really what was wrong with them was a heavy metal lead overload on their body and internal microscopic bleeding from the intestinal area. So here's what we did. I mean, essentially, we looked first of all, microscopic intestinal bleeding. Okay, what's going on here? We want to look at a food sensitivity test. Okay. They say, well, I don't get bloated. I don't have whatever. Okay, fine. But what we look at for our food sensitivity test is from an IgG perspective, right? So we're looking at it a day or 2 days later. So you might eat bread and you say, I feel totally fine. And I agree. Like, for example, I feel totally fine when I eat bread. I love it, But what happens is, from an IgG response, an immunoglobulin G response, a white blood cell response, a day or two later, it causes inflammation for some people when they eat gluten or they eat wheat. So it doesn't cause bloating. It doesn't cause acid reflux. It causes nothing in the intestines except systemic-based inflammation after a day or two. So hard to figure out. But you can figure it out with an at-home test called an IgG food sensitivity test. And again, I'm going to link up everything in the show notes today. You don't have to run any. You can run one, you can run all 5, you can run whatever you'd like. But the truth is that you need to know that the tests are available to you. that annual blood work is not enough if you have some type of dis-ease with the body, meaning like you don't have the energy, your skin's not at its best, your mood's not at its best, your digestion's not at its best, you're starting to get wrinkles prematurely, you're starting to get lines, you're starting to get weakened hair, skin, nails, any of those things. All of those things are correctable when you look at these subclinical lab tests that don't diagnose disease, but they look at the underlying root causes that eventually lead to disease in the body. And again, it's dis-ease. It's a dis-ease of the body. It's an imbalance of the body. If the body is at an equilibrium, at an equal base state, right? It's level, or it's at a homeostatic base state, it's not sick. That's the bottom line. A healthy body is not sick. It can't be sick. So we look at the food sensitivity from an IgG perspective, not an immediate response, but a delayed response that causes low-level inflammation that just builds up in the body. You end up with migraines and joint pain and brain fog and fatigue and skin issues, all of those issues that you don't know where they're coming from, and it doesn't show up in your blood work, okay? The next one I would run is the organic acids test. All right, for this particular person, we would say, let's look at or anybody, right? Let's look at the markers for, we talk a lot about looking for candida in the gut, bacterial overgrowth in the gut, the basically microbiome balance. But also this test looks at neurotransmitter waste, or the production of neurotransmitters. It looks at mitochondrial function for energy. It looks at liver glutathione for the liver. Is it producing enough or not enough? It looks at all your B vitamins, which is amazing, right? So this person in particular I was talking about before, well, it's really hard to make oxygen inside of the red blood cells if you don't have B vitamins, especially folate, especially B12 and B6 as a cofactor as well. So, and it tests vitamin C. I mean, vitamin C is one of those crucial things. I can't even tell you. It's like probably 30, 40%, maybe even 50% of the people I test are low in vitamin C, meaning they get some vitamin C. Yes, it's enough, meaning like they don't get scurvy, right? But the truth is that they're functionally deficient, that if they had more, their immune system would be boosted. They would have more energy. They would fight off colds easier. Their skin, their hair, their nails. Everybody's talking about collagen. Well, what about vitamin C? Vitamin C is what helps to build strong collagen in the skin. Don't just give collagen, give the thing that helps to build that up. It just makes sense, meaning like you need the building blocks. The building blocks, the vitamins, the minerals, those are the foundation of life, and that's what the organic acids test looks at. Okay, I'll link that up as well. Next up is the hair tissue mineral analysis. Had the misdiagnosed cancer case that I was just talking about ran a hair tissue mineral analysis a month before, 2 months before, they would have saw the lead in their system, okay? The hair tissue mineral analysis looks at heavy metals. It's not the only one. You could actually run heavy metals in the blood. That's one compartment. You can look at heavy metals in the urine. You could do a urine challenge, or you can run it in the hair. Not necessarily one better than the other. It's just 3 different ways to look at heavy metals in the body and how they're being excreted. Everybody gets in these camps like, oh, this is the best, that's the best. No, they can all be the best. They really can. You just have to know when to use it and why. But the other reason I like the hair tissue mineral analysis is it looks at the fight or flight, autonomic nervous system, parasympathetic, sympathetic nervous system, meaning like, okay, are you overly stressed? Is your body compensating correctly? Et cetera, et cetera. Plus it looks at copper versus zinc. More, I'll tell you right now, children especially, you look at ADD, ADHD, executive functioning disorder, allergies, asthma, you're going to see a lot of the time a copper-based toxicity. Again, it makes it sound dramatic, but basically what it means is that it's copper is too high versus zinc. They're out of alignment, and it's going to lead to an inflammatory-based issue. It's going to lead to mood-based issues. This is pretty well studied, pretty well documented. I mean, you can look into all of these things for yourself. I love the hair tissue mineral analysis, one of the first labs that I ever ran. And then this next lab was the one that finally gave me again, I hate the word diagnosis, but led to me then being shown to have Addison's disease and what's later was called myalgic encephalomyelitis in POTS. So here's the deal. I ran a hormone adrenal test. We add on the thyroid hormone adrenal. Both are great. But what it does, it looks at your cortisol production over 24 hours. A blood test, they'll run it once. That's it. You don't get to see total cortisol output for the day. I have to ask myself, is this person producing enough cortisol over the day? And if they're still tired, well, then there could be what's called a broken diurnal rhythm. And I talked about that last Friday. So tune into episode 770 for when you should be producing cortisol and when you shouldn't be. Because if someone has low energy in the morning, but they have plenty of energy before going to bed and they can't sleep, well, that is literally a broken diurnal rhythm. And I'm going to be talking about that in depth in my upcoming book, which is only a couple weeks away. It's coming. And so this is the test that I ran. I brought it back to my PCP for my functional medicine doctor, and I said, I'm not producing any cortisol. Could we check into this? They ran it. I did an ACTH or an ACT-based stim test, adrenocorticotropin releasing hormone. That's what they basically pump into your system. It tells your hypothalamus to tell your pituitary gland to start to produce cortisol. And they gave me that stimulation. They artificially did it for my body. And when they put it in, I still didn't produce cortisol. And that's how they diagnose you essentially with Addison's disease, which is the lack of cortisol-based production. It's the lowest you can go. It basically means you have zero get up and go. You can't mount an anti-inflammatory based response from cortisol. And I know we'll be talking about cortisol as a bad thing. I'm telling you right now, though, if you have no cortisol production, that's worse sometimes than having a higher level. Now, Cushing's disease is high cortisol produced throughout the day. I've worked with a number of people with that as well. That's not great either. Trust me, neither high nor low is a good thing. You don't want to be in those ranges, but you talk about zapped of all life. If you can't produce cortisol, you can't even get out of bed in the morning. Your whole body's swollen. It's not a good thing. And that's, of course, why they give people prednisone. Prednisone is just basically like a kick, really like a kick in the pants. Not a good thing for you. Certainly not a good thing for you, but it works. And that works through essentially a catabolic process or producing more cortisol. Okay, so that's an absolutely amazing test. The thyroid hormone adrenal, or just the hormone and adrenal. It runs your progesterone and estrogen, cortisol for all 4 times during the day. It runs your testosterone, DHEA. And then if you add on the thyroid, it goes free T4, free T3, TSH, TPO antibodies, looking at Hashimoto's or an autoimmune-based response. It looks at vitamin D. It looks at insulin, and it looks at hemoglobin A1C. So if you have trouble losing weight, that is the number one lab test. And if you're exhausted, if your hair is falling out, you run that lab test. It's fantastic. Okay, the last one I would like to mention, there are so many, right? There are so many, but this is what I call my big 5. I did a pretty big, actually, podcast on this not too long ago. And let me see if I can find it quickly. But it's called The Big 5 Lab Tests Everyone Should Run. And that was episode 718. So what I'll do is I'll link that up. On that episode, I go through exactly what all those lab tests are. Those are the first 5 that I recommended in my practice before people decide to do genetic testing, telomere testing, you name it, like all the fun ones, right? So the last one is omega-3 testing. I've said this before and I'll say it again. It's one of the most overlooked lab tests in the world. It is the simplest way to figure out if your body is inflamed from a improper ratio of omega-6s to omega-3s. I ended up running this on that previous, like I said, cancer-based or misdiagnosed cancer-based patient previously. And their level was like a 22-1 from omega-6s to omega-3s. Their body was so inflamed. So there's this massive prostaglandin response. And prostaglandins, well, you can have the predominantly inflammatory, and one of them is anti-inflammatory. But as we're looking at this prostaglandin-based response, which I'm not going to get into the biochemistry today, although I would love to do that on a future podcast of trying to get you to understand why omega-3s are so important, is that they're important, but everything's in a ratio, right? You're still supposed to have more omega-6s than omega-3s. In nature, it's not a 1-to-1 ratio. It's actually more like a 3-to-1, maybe a 4-to-1 ratio. In my practice, I aim for a 3-to-1 ratio, and I aim for more than a 9% saturation rate for those omega-3s in the blood. When we look at that, it's correlated with a 90% risk reduction rate for cardiovascular death. So if you're looking at people in your family with high blood pressure or stroke or high cholesterol or heart attack or even Alzheimer's or brain-based issues, and you haven't run this test, it's just like, why? It's so easy. It's so easy to fix, meaning that if your omega-6s are off or they're too high, we're going to suggest a nutrition plan that's lower in omega-6s. If your omega-3s are too low, we're going to say, well, is it low ALA from flax and chia, or is it low EPA or DHA, which, again, one's more anti-inflammatory, one's better for the nervous system. By using functional medicine, you can literally customize something for your unique body. That's the amazing thing about it. We don't have to guess. There's no more guesswork, right? I always say, if possible, and now I know this isn't accessible to everyone, but I say, don't guess, test. When I was a young kid, my family couldn't afford every single one of these lab tests. So what did we do? Well, we did one at a time when we were able to. The first most important one was the hormone adrenal, because I was wiped out. And then we did the hair tissue mineral analysis. And later we did a stool test. A stool test is another great one, because a stool test is going to look at H. pylori, right? That's a great one. I had H. pylori. I didn't realize that for another 2 years later because I never ran a stool test, okay? So even though I was getting rid of the yeast and the bacteria, I didn't get rid of the H. pylori. I got rid of that, felt so much better, started digesting my proteins better. Really, really fantastic stuff. So again, you can figure out all of these things. You know what? I'll link up the stool test as well on today's show. So essentially what I did was I just explained to you. I'm not trying to push you in one direction, but what I want to do is open your eyes, right? Open your eyes to all of the possibilities that you have in front of you. that these things exist. They exist for you. They exist for your parents, your siblings, your friends, your coworkers, your children. Anyone can run these tests, all right? Anyone can run these tests. You hook yourself up with a local functional medicine. They have to be good though, right? Research them. Find out if they're the right fit. Do they work with these specific cases? Just look at it the whole. Get a referral. Or if you feel it's the right fit, order one of the lab tests from us. Order all 5, whatever works for you. I'll link up the big 5 as well. But here's the deal. Start to look into your health, right? If you're feeling great, then good for you. Fantastic. Just kind of knock these off over the years. Start to look at your organic acids. Start to look at your food sensitivity. Look at your omega-3. Because those things are going to help you age better. You're going to get more customized. And if you're feeling good. Keep running those blood work. No problem at all. But if you're not feeling well, if you're not feeling optimal, if you believe you could have more energy, right? Feel like you could have more life in your body, that you could have more vibrancy to your mood, but also your skin, your hair, your nails, all of those things, then I can't recommend enough going deeper. That's it. So do I believe in running your annual blood work? Absolutely. I run it myself. I run it once to twice a year. If anything is ever a little off, I just run it again another 12 weeks later after I tweak things with either nutritional supplements or food or whatever it might be. And I just make sure, boom, I'm right back in my parameters. And that's how you stay healthy. You catch things before they go wrong. Now, if something's wrong, well, now you just start to do the work, right? You start to look into it from a much deeper level. So yes, continue to run your blood work. And if you didn't listen to that show, just tune into that previous one. I'm going to link everything up in today's show notes. That was on episode 767 last week, what to ask for and why when running your blood work. And then for today, on why running your annual blood work is not enough. So you have to do it, but understanding that at some point in your life, you're going to want to go deeper. And when you go deeper, you will find out those hidden things, right? The hidden underlying root causes that eventually lead to disease if they're left to go long enough. So hopefully today's show was helpful. This was a fun one for me because I love to teach. I really do. And I love teaching on the topic of functional medicine, integrative medicine, naturopathic medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, all the different medicines, because the truth is there's answers within all of them and we just kind of need to take a little bit from each one. That's the best way, I believe. So thank you so much. Please do feel free to pass on this show to anyone you believe it could help. I want to sincerely thank you for your support of this podcast. I couldn't do it without you, and I mean that. I truly do. I also want to make sure you knew that we now have multiple ways for you to find your answers to the most difficult health, wellness, weight loss, and anti-aging questions. You can find podcast-specific topics like thyroid, adrenal, hormones, sleep, digestion, Ayurveda, and many more at stevencabral.com/podcasts that will then link you to your favorite Apple, Spotify, and other podcast players. Plus, all new podcasts and weekly exclusive video content is being added to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Stephen Cabral. And that's Stephen with a PH. Head on over and subscribe so that you don't miss any of the exclusive content. Lastly, if you've ever found any of my podcasts or books to be helpful, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a review on iTunes or your favorite media player for the podcast. Rating and subscribing to the YouTube and podcast allow me to reach more and more people and help spread my mission of healing throughout the world. Thank you again for being a part of this movement.